Next, we're going to have Jim Mitchell. He's going to share with us some of his experiences and maybe growing pains, successes of 30 plus years of biological farming principles being applied on his farm. Here's Jim. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to be here today, and up until now we've had good speakers, so we're going to change.
Pull the mic closer. Stay there.
I'll try not to bite it. But like I said, up until now we've had good speakers, so you get what you get. Gary asked me to give a little insight on what it's actually been about 35 years now that we've been on the biological program. Closer? Okay, closer. You have to eat it. Back in '89 when we started, we had a hog farm in southwest Ohio, and things were tough. We had a growing family. We had 1,500 head of hogs, fair to finish all the time. We had just bought the farm. My dad sold it to me, and his idea of fertility was, well, if the government's going to pay for lime, I'll put it on. Other than that, we spread manure, but we didn't have near enough animals. I got hooked up with Brookside soil testing, and the first time the guy came out and tested my soil, he was beating the probe in with a rubber handle mallet, and it wasn't dry. Couldn't get it in the ground. So I was hunting for something, and I'd heard about ridge-till. And I thought, well, if I use ridge-till, at least I can cut down on herbicide cost, and I can just cultivate it. You know, I kind of felt like the new guy that went into the feed store and says, I want 25 chickens. The guy sold him 25 chickens, and he left. Next day, he came back and said, I want 50 chickens. The guy gave him 50 chicks, went home. Next day, he came back and says, I need 100 chicks. So he sold him 100 chicks. Well, about the fourth day, he came back and says, I need 200 chicks. The guy said, man, says, you must be really expanding fast. He says, no, not having any luck at all. I'm either planting them too deep or too far apart. That's kind of how I felt. But Ohio State was pushing ridge-till, and so they had a meeting somewhere in northern Ohio, and I went and I met Dave Larson. I thought, man, that guy's either crazy or smart. I never could figure out which. Well, the next day they had another ridge-till meeting, and I thought, well, that's not too far. I got to learn more about this, so I went. Who else was there but Dave? Again, so I quizzed him for a long time. We ate supper together. So then within 2 or 3 weeks, I was in Princeton to meet Dave. He said, you ought to start small. And he gave me a formula to start with, so I did. I gave him the whole 1,000 acres, all in 1 year. I don't know who was more surprised, me or him. It had to work if I gave him everything. But the first year, oh my goodness, I didn't have any tanks. I didn't have any mixing area. You know, the fertilizer dealer just bought out, we put it on. I felt, on the first year, I felt like a mad chemist or a moonshiner, and I wasn't exactly sure which, because sometimes it smelled like both. Had to buy all my tanks, got a lot of them used. Some of them held liquid and some of them didn't. But you know, after all that work and worry and mixing and all the buckets and pails, but it worked. Not right away. But over 3 to 5 years, things changed. The ground didn't crust over, which was a big problem for us. We had less insect pressure, and the grain was drier at harvest. And we were slowly, underlined slowly, able to cut fertilizer rates by 1/4 or more. My nitrogen rate went from 200 plus to 150, but the yield went up. We had soil tests that every year went up, even though we cut fertilizer rates. And just this past year, we had a field of corn that made over 240 dry that wasn't planted until the first week of June, and it never rained after the 10th of August. And now when I say it never rained, it never rained. Most guys want a quick fix, and I know you all, everybody wants a quick fix. But most problems are unbalanced soils. You need to soil test and apply at variable rate. It costs you more, but it'll save you a lot of money. You will save a third of your bill by going variable rate because you use so much less fertilizer. But don't forget lime, and that's been mentioned here several times today. It's probably more important than your fertilizer, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper. Just make sure you use the right kind, whether you need high cal or dolomitic, and your soil test can tell you that. Well, you're sitting there asking, how in the world can you cut fertilizer rates and still get good yields? Well, it all starts in the fall, and it's been talked about here today before, with a good residues program, which is going to cost you somewhere between $30 and $40 an acre, with a gallon of thiazole and 2 gallons of 28 added. But did you know, and you probably do some, that a 200 bushel corn crop contains over $200 of PK&S? Now that's a lot of money, but that's at 21 prices. At 22 prices, it's $390 an acre. And if you can get the stuff put on green stalks, and I mean that's when they're still sappy, right behind the combine, there's another $250 worth of nitrogen in there. So if you spend $35 to $40 and get $390 to $550 back, even I can figure out that's a good deal. Even if it adds to your fall workload, everybody said, oh no, we can't do that. No time? I didn't have time. I hired it done. We had an applicator in the neighborhood that didn't have anything to do in the fall because nobody sprayed anything in the fall. He'd come over and spray everything I had for $3 an acre. If you don't have time, get it done. It doesn't make a difference how you do it, but do it. You can't afford not to use residues on corn stalks. And I think everybody says, yeah, that'd be right. What about your bean stubble? Well, you can drop the 28, but keep the gallon of thiazole, and you'll be amazed how well that ground works or no-tills in the spring. And you can even put in your fall herbicide program at the same time, and that saves you a trip. Now we're in the right path, aren't we? But get it done as soon as possible after harvest. We've been known to harvest a field, fertilize it, spray it, and work it in all on the same day. That's how you get the biggest benefit. Don't lose that stalk juice. You know, that's the stuff that drips in your face when you're working under the corn head and you say, I wish that wouldn't happen. It's sticky. Now in the spring, we go in with MVP and furrow in 2x2, side dress, or foliar, or all four. It really doesn't make any difference. It's always a winner. And you'll be able to tell to the row where you run out, where you had a nozzle plug out. We like to use 3 gallons of MVP in furrow and 3 gallons foliar on beans at the V2 or V3. It mixes with everything. You won't have to worry about any compatibility issues, and it always works. We're going to add MST and graphite or talc, whichever your planter requires. But if you're getting some buildup in your tank or boxes, back off just a little bit. Not on the MST, but back off on your lubricants. You probably don't need that much anyway. And it helps a lot if you stir it in a little bit. Try to buy your AgriEnergy resources supplies in bulk if you can. It's a lot cheaper. They'll do split loads, but order early to facilitate trucking and make freight cheaper for everyone. Freight's getting to be a real expensive situation anymore. If you're buying tanks, if you're just new to this or you want to expand, go with cone bottom tanks. Yeah, I know they're more expensive with that stand, but they're so easy to agitate and clean. You will not regret the investment. The next point would be to agitate your products and clean your tanks. Bios tend to grow, and you won't remember what else you've had in that tank, so clean it out before every new load. You can agitate with liquid or air. I just run a 1/2-inch PVC line from the top of the cone bottom tank to the bottom and blow air in it. It works great. But agitate every time you pull out of that tank, even if it's the same day. Now, more from 30 years of voice of experience. Kind of reminds me of the 2 guys that were in a ditch digging. It was a hot day. They were sweating up a storm. And the one guy kept looking out, and there was a boss standing under a shade tree. Didn't even have any sweat rolling down his face. One guy said to the other, says, how come we're in here digging? He's up there under a shade tree not doing a darn thing. Guy says, I don't know, but I'm gonna go find out. He jumps out of the ditch, walks over the tree, says, boss, he says, how come we're in the ditch working to death? You're standing under a tree, not doing a thing. He says, I'll tell you what, son, I'll show you. It's called intelligence. You know what that means? No. He says, I'll show you. So he said, you stand right there. I'm going to hold my hand up against this tree. You hit it as hard as you can. So the guy hauled off and hit just as hard as he could, but of course, just before he hit him, the guy moved his hand. So he smacked his hand right into the tree. And he says, now that's intelligence. Oh, okay. So he goes back down the ditch with his buddy. And his buddy said, well, what'd he say? What'd he say? He said, I tell you what, he said, it's all about intelligence. Well, what's that mean? Here, I'll show you. So he took his shovel and held it up right in front of his face. Says, here, you hit this shovel as hard as you can. Now that's intelligence. Some of you are a little slow here this afternoon. Words of wisdom. Never, 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 did I say never? Mix calcium and phosphorus. Unless you like cleaning out cottage cheese from all your tanks and lines. Guaranteed. If you're using a new mix, especially in foliar or furrow, jar test it. Or use a bucket. Do something. Try to use the same proportions and let it sit for a while, see if anything happens. Sometimes it does. It definitely might. Get and use easy to clean filters and filter everything, including your water. Most of us have a water tank somewhere. We store the water and then we pull out. You know what grows in those water tanks at times? I like an 80 mesh going into the planter or sprayer. And if you do this, you won't need those little tip screens, you know, that are always drop in the field. You won't need them. And your small planter orifices will seldom plug. For filters, if you're buying them the first time, the bigger the better. You only have to buy them once. Our main filter is a 4-inch cast iron mammoth that sits on the ground that you only have to clean maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Another point of interest, don't add sugar to MVP unless you're going to use it right away. And you can rinse out your planter and your nurse tank every night. Bios love sugar and they grow very quickly. Just saying, that's exactly what happens. If you're setting up a new system, invest in a flow meter. Do it right the first time and do it the easy way. Don't guess. They don't cost that much. And last but not least, fish works great. I don't know where Reggie is, but fish is a wonderful product. The only problem is it stinks. Sorry, Reggie. The first year I used fish, it wasn't quite as refined probably as it is now. My dad was helping me at that time, and he says, you know, he says, you're either going to quit using this or I'm not going to help you anymore. That night we had calls from the neighbors, what did you use, or is this stuff going to kill me? So, you know, there are things that you can think about. There are things we've learned over the past 35 years. It's probably kept us in business, quite honestly, as we've been able to cut back fertilizer rates, yields have gone up. The soil is so much more mellow to work with. Any questions?
Well, you get intelligence.
What?
Oh, you got it. Intelligence.
Intelligence, that's right. Watch those shovels. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim.